In August 1990, a university student in Gainesville, Florida, failed to answer repeated phone calls from friends. And hours later, police entered her apartment, discovering a brutal murder scene inside the small residence. Investigators immediately noticed signs that the killer had entered quietly during the night.
Before attacking the victim inside her bedroom, and evidence showed the apartment had been searched after the murder.
Only hours later, another nearby apartment revealed 2 more victims murdered during the same night.
And detectives realized the attacks were connected because of similarities in entry methods, evidence, and the extreme violence inside the rooms. The killer moved through both apartments without attracting attention, despite the buildings being filled with students preparing for a new university semester. Witnesses reported hearing strange noises during the night, but believe they came from parties or moving activity common around campus housing. Investigators recovered fingerprints, shoe impressions, and signs showing the killer had spent time inside the apartments after the murders. After the murders, repositioning objects and moving through multiple rooms calmly. The discovery caused immediate panic across Gainesville, and students began leaving apartments, refusing to stay alone overnight near the campus area. Days later, police increased patrols around student housing, while investigators searched wooded areas, alleys, and roads surrounding the apartment complexes for witnesses or discarded evidence. Then another student disappeared after failing to arrive at work, and investigators later found her body inside a different apartment miles away from the earlier murders. The attack followed the same pattern: forced entry, nighttime assault, and evidence that the killer remained inside after the murder. Detectives realized the killer was selecting apartments with vulnerable access points, including sliding glass doors, unsecured windows, and buildings with limited nighttime visibility.
One witness described seeing a suspicious man walking through apartment parking lots shortly before one of the murders, carrying a bag and moving between buildings slowly.
Investigators created composite sketches and compared reports from residents who noticed someone watching apartments during previous nights. Then, police discovered evidence that one apartment had been entered unsuccessfully days before the murders, suggesting the killer had attempted earlier attacks but finally gaining access. Another witness reported hearing footsteps outside bedroom windows late at night, followed by sounds of someone testing locked doors around the building. Investigators mapped every movement connected to the crimes and realized the killer likely traveled through wooded areas, behind apartment complexes to avoid main roads and police patrols. Search teams then recovered items discarded near forest trails, including gloves, tape, and clothing potentially connected to the murders. As surveillance expanded around Gainesville, officers stopped numerous suspicious individuals, but the killer continued avoiding detection, while fear spread throughout the city. Several students began sleeping in groups, carrying weapons, and avoiding ground-floor apartments after sunset, while police worked around the clock reviewing leads. Then, another major break occurred when investigators connected the Gainesville murders to a separate violent crime, committed months earlier in another state involving similar methods and evidence patterns. That connection introduced the name Danny Rolling, a drifter with a violent criminal history, known for burglaries, armed attacks, and moving frequently between locations. Detectives discovered Rolling had been camping in wooded areas near Gainesville during the murders, and witnesses reported seeing a man matching his description near stores, laundromats, and wooded trails around the city. Police searched campsites hidden in forest areas and recovered tools, weapons, audio recordings, and items connected directly to the murders. One recovered recording contained disturbing references to the killings, and investigators realized the suspect had documented parts of his crimes privately while hiding in the woods. The evidence rapidly intensified the manhunt as detectives tracked Rolling's movements through stolen vehicles, witness sightings, and prior arrests across multiple states. As investigators closed in on Danny Rolling, they discovered he had already fled Gainesville shortly after the murders, traveling through several states while avoiding police attention. Detectives reconstructed his movements using motel records, stolen vehicle reports, witness sightings, and purchases made near highways connected to his escape route. During the investigation, police learned Rolling frequently hid in forests, abandoned areas, and temporary campsites, carrying weapons, burglary tools, and supplies, allowing him to move unnoticed for long periods. Search teams returned to wooded areas near Gainesville and uncovered additional evidence buried near campsites, including clothing, ammunition, maps, and stolen items linked to victims. Forensic analysis connected fingerprints, fibers, and ballistic evidence recovered from crime scenes directly to Rolling, while witness statements placed him near apartment complexes during the nights of the murders. Investigators also discovered Rolling spent nights walking through student housing areas, studying apartment layouts, entry points, and routines before selecting targets. One resident described seeing a man crouched near parked cars, watching apartment windows only days before the attacks began.
Police eventually located Rolling in custody on unrelated charges after he was arrested following an armed robbery.
And investigators immediately linked him to the Gainesville murders through forensic evidence.
During questioning, Rolling initially denied involvement, but detectives confronted him with physical evidence, witness reports, campsite discoveries, and recordings recovered from the woods.
Investigators searched storage areas and personal belongings connected to him, recovering weapons, documents, maps, and additional evidence connected to the murders.
The recordings found near his campsite became a major breakthrough because they included references matching details never released publicly from inside the apartments.
Detectives reconstructed the final timelines of victims using phone calls, work schedules, witness accounts, and apartment activity during the nights of the murders.
The evidence showed Rolling moved rapidly between apartment complexes, entering buildings during late-night hours before escaping back into wooded areas surrounding Gainesville. Forensic teams matched shoe impressions from crime scenes to footwear linked directly to Rolling, while recovered fibers connected him to bedrooms and hallways inside the apartments.
Court proceedings later revealed the killer had stalked apartment areas carefully before attacks and selected victims based on opportunity, access, and isolation inside the buildings.
Investigators also connected Rolling to additional violent crimes committed before arriving in Florida, establishing a pattern of burglaries, home invasions, armed attacks, and murders stretching across multiple states.
The Gainesville murders officially ended after Rolling's arrest, but investigators continued reviewing unsolved crimes connected to locations where he had traveled before 1990.
The final case timeline revealed a non-stop sequence of nighttime break-ins, apartment attacks, disappearances, escapes, forest hideouts.
And evidence discoveries spread across Gainesville during one of the most terrifying crime sprees in Florida history.